It's the Worldwide Sports Radio Network. You're listening to the Big Guy Sports Radio Show. Your home for New York sports.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Wake Up with Baseball in New York, presented by the Big Guy Sports Network. We are here on the 4th of July, joining you for this holiday, celebrating with you before you all go out to your barbecues and beach and wherever else they let you go today. How is everybody today? I am your host, Jim, along with my co-hosts, Mac and Matt. How are you guys doing today?
I'm doing great today, Jim. Can't wait to get the show underway. Big guests, up all night researching. My eyes are bloodshot again for today's show, but I'm ready to rock.
All right, Matt, how are you?
Yes, sir. I was up all night for a different reason. I wasn't researching and doing my homework like Mac was, but we're here and we're ready to rock and roll, baby. Good morning.
Yeah, we are good to go. Speaking of guests, we do have a special guest today, and joining us coming up here in a minute will be Dominic Amore. He is the author of the book A Franchise on the Rise, First 20 Years of the Yankees. He's a columnist for the Hartford Courant. Hopefully I pronounced that right. Since 1988, he has done coverage for the Yankees over the years, and he still does coverage of the minor league baseball team, the Yard Goats, and UConn Sports. He's a 4-time winner of the Sports Writers Association for the state's best writer, and we are going to bring him in and say good morning. Dominic, good morning. How are you today, sir?
Good morning, guys. How are you? Nice to be with you.
Good morning.
It's good to have you, and we appreciate you taking some time out of your day to come and join us, and we will get right into it because I know we have a lot of questions. And I can tell you the truth, Mac did not put that book there just because you're coming on. If you look at any tape, it's always there, I promise you.
Well, I appreciate it. I always have my copy on handy for Zoom calls and
very
the like. So
very nice. He's always got it. I don't want to, if he didn't, I would tell you on the air just to mess with you. So I guess I'll start off. My first question, really, because, I know a lot about the current stuff, so any information I can get about the stuff I don't know is great. Yeah. How many different names did the Yankees discuss before settling on the Yankees, and what was the final factor in that decision?
Well, in those days, teams didn't necessarily have, official names the way they do today. It was kind of like a word of mouth thing. So their official name, much like the Mets, as you know, their official name is actually the Metropolitan Baseball Club of New York. And, the Yankees, as an entry in the new league that had formed a couple of years earlier, they were the American League. They were the New York American League Baseball Club. So a lot of people called them the Americans because they were in the American League. That was common throughout the country in cities that had two leagues. The American League team would be the Americans, the National League team would be the Nationals. So they were called that. They were called in some cases so they were often called by the owners. So the owner was named Bill Devery, and they were called the Deveryites. That was another one of their names. But they played their ballpark was built on the highest point in Manhattan, on 168th and Broadway, where New York Presbyterian is today. So they were also very commonly called the Highlanders, obviously. And that's the name that we know. We think of them as the Highlanders. That's most common. But there was they didn't have, their uniforms didn't say Highlanders, and there was no logo with an H on it or a peak on it or anything like that. So that was more of a word of mouth thing. But that didn't go, the newspapers didn't like it because it was too long, didn't fit in headlines. There are issues with that. So the first opening day in 1903 had a big patriotic display, which was not typical at that time. There were flags all over the Hilltop Park. There were flags of a lot of different countries planted on the field for the ceremonies because of New York's history of immigrants. So they try to represent everyone. So there was, because of this, they were somewhat associated with patriotism, and of course, the Yankees being a name for Americans overseas. So even as early as 1904, newspapers started calling them the Yankees informally. So they were known kind of as all these different things, and they really didn't have a fan base, believe it or not, because the Giants really owned New York and the Dodgers owned Brooklyn. But when they hired Frank Chance away from the Cubs to manage them in 1913, he came up with the idea that they should have no nickname. They had never won anything, and he said that they should just have no nickname because they hadn't earned one. The Giants earned the Giants nickname because they're always winning. The Yankee owners rejected that out of hand because by now more formal nicknames were becoming the thing. So after they moved out of Hilltop Park and they started to rent the Polo Grounds in 1913, that's when they officially became the Yankees. So they didn't really have a name. I think history is kind of records them as the Highlanders, although you rarely see that referenced at the time. So they kind of, at one point, the 7 different papers in New York would call them 7 different things. So they had a whole lot of different names.
They should do a Highlanders throwback day one day at Yankee Stadium or something. Dress them up like the Highlanders, let them run it again. Now, one of the most iconic symbols in all of sports across the planet is the one right here on my hat, the interlocking symbol representing the New York Yankees. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of the symbol, where it came from, why it was established, the reason behind it?
Yeah, it goes back to 1879. Actually, it was it was created by Tiffany. Tiffany designed it, and it became a badge, or it became a symbol for New York policemen who were killed in the line of duty. And they were awarded a medal with that logo on it. Now the Yankees or the Highlanders or whatever we want to call them didn't start using it until 1909. Their first 6 years, they would just have a plain block N and Y, usually an N on one breast and a Y on the other, and their hats would have nothing. Then in 1909. One of the owners, again, was a former New York police chief, and I guess he didn't need copyrights or permission or anything like that in those days. And he appropriated that interlocking NY with that style and used it, began using it on the jersey and eventually on the hats a couple of years later. And it's interesting. The Yankees haven't changed their uniforms really since 1921 or so, or 20, or I guess in the late 30s they added the NY on the chest. But in the early days they had a different uniform every year. Usually whatever the style was.
I love it. Well, Dom, we all talk about spring training. Today how they have their fields and everything. But one manager had a unique spring training at least 1 year that I know of.
Yeah.
But he actually had a plantation down in Georgia where he would harvest his crops, and he decided, if I'm right, to bring down the players for some spring training and kind of help them out at the same time. Can you kind of tell us about that?
Yeah, well, you can imagine what the Players Association would say about this arrangement today. It probably wouldn't fly. But George Stallings, he's better known in history as the guy who managed the Braves in 1914 when they went from last on July 4th to winning the World Series. But he got a job managing the Yankees in 1909. And what had happened was his family had lost their farm in the Reconstruction period. And when he got into baseball, his goal was to buy it back. So little by little, he made a little bit more money, and he bought a little more of the land that his family used to own. And when he got hired by the Yankees in 1909, it put him over the top, and he had bought back the entire farm in Haddock, Georgia. So he was trying to get that going again. So he got this idea that he would bring not the best players on the team, obviously, because they would probably have had none of it, but all the guys who were trying to make the team and make an impression, maybe 20 or 25 of them. He brought them down, and he cleared out land so that they could play games on his farm. but then he would also have them get in shape by tilling the fields and pushing the plows and working on the field during the game. So again, you could just now, of course, obviously they stayed. He had a lot of rooms there, and they were able to stay there and live there. But you can imagine what that would have been like today. But one of the players had pitched for the Hartford minor league team the year before, a guy by the name of Pete Wilson. And he was writing the sports editor of the Hartford Courant with every so often with accounts of this bizarre goings on. And he would write little descriptions of what they were doing, that they tilled the fields on this day, and then they went to this open space and they played, and they would play games against the people that Stallings had working on his farm. And at that point, again, these are the days of segregated baseball. He had a lot of African-American workers on his farm, and they would play. And, that probably was not even legal in Georgia at that time.
Right.
With the Jim Crow laws. And this Pete Wilson would write back to the Courant about how talented, how good these African-American players were. This is in 1909, and that they were good enough to be playing, that some – he actually said that Hartford should sign some of them to play, which, so long before. And when researching this book, these are stories that were, that they were kind of they're lost in the pages of the different newspapers that they appeared in. And now today that you can search a lot of newspapers by database, you find a lot of stories that you say, wow, why was this forgotten?
Right.
So that's one of them. This bizarre experiment of pre-spring training at his farm was kind of lost, and probably a good idea, because I don't think it was a very good idea. But ultimately, they moved on from there to have their spring training in Macon, and the Yankees moved around quite a bit with their spring training.
Cool. Very nice. Very nice. Let me ask you, and this is something that I did not know until somebody told me a few days ago. Maybe you could confirm this for me. So the sources told me that the Yankees were the first team to have spring training outside the country. Is that true? And if so, where did it take place?
Well, they had spring training in Bermuda.
Wow.
Yeah, this was a little bit later on in 1918, but they had spring training there, or rather 1917.
What led them there? How'd that happen? You
know what? The owner, one of the owners, Frank Farrell, I think knew somebody, and they got a deal. They're always on the cheap, those original owners, and they cleared off these massive cricket grounds where they played cricket, and they had spring training there, and but what happened was, the weather obviously there was now. Remember, they didn't really train in Florida at this time. They didn't train. If they did, they trained in Jacksonville. It was about as far south as they got. So the weather was warm, but it wasn't really tropical warm. And when they went out and they played out there, actually I take it back. It was 1913, and it was Frank Chance. When they trained out in Bermuda, they all raved about how incredible the weather was. It was 80 degrees. And warm every day. And when they came back, their first game in Boston, it was about 40 degrees. Oh. And both of the starting pitchers, their starting pitcher, Ray Caldwell, and the Red Sox starting pitcher, Smokey Joe Wood, both injured their arms on opening day. And the Yankees at least blamed the fact that they had trained in 80-degree weather and weren't ready for the Northeast. Yeah, and so they never went back there again. But of course, today they're in Tampa, and they realize there are ways to mitigate that.
Right.
Hal Stan Brenner Field down there off I-4, off 75 there. Yeah. But I'll tell you what, you talked about how back in the day the owners just tried to take that cheap route. But these days, these guys are getting paid a crazy amount of money out here in the MLB. Yeah. What comparatively the salaries then to now? What were they like? Like, what was considered a top paid guy by the Yankees or another organization in baseball at that time compared to what it is now? Like,
Well, when the Yankees first started and the American League and National League would bid against themselves for players and try to steal each other's players, the Yankees made an astronomical offer to in order to get Wee Willie Keeler. The astronomical offer was $10,000 a year for 3 years, and that was far more than anybody else was making at the time. $3,000 or $4,000 per year was a pretty typical salary. The Yankees tried to get Honus Wagner when they first started, and Clark Griffith, who was the first manager / GM, showed up at his house on a snowy night and put $21,000 bills on his kitchen table to try to get him. And he turned it down because he was that loyal to Pittsburgh. He was from there. But to answer your question, $4,000 or $5,000 per year would be a typical salary.
wow.
One year, and if you didn't have a good year, you were going to get cut the next year. So that's and that system really lasted, really until the 1970s.
So basically, what you're telling me is a guy like Bryce Harper or Giancarlo Stanton could have funded the entire league with their salary now.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, without question. Yeah. Now keep in mind that's $10,000 went a long way then.
Yeah.
It would probably be the equivalent of about $300,000 or $400,000 today.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, I mean,
that's what I said.
Yeah.
So they did. So by the standards of the day, they did very well.
Right.
But many of them, and of course, this is why players held out for more money every year. Often missed. Joe, if you ever look, I remember when I was covering the Yankees, and they put out an opening day fact sheet every year, and Bernie Williams had become the Yankee who started the most opening days in center field. And I said, well, how could that be? He's only been here 8-9 years. How could he have the most opening day starts in center field? Well, it's because Joe DiMaggio was holding out every year. Wow. And he only started on opening day 3 or 4 times because he was making maybe 15 or 20,000 in the 30s, and he was holding out, for more.
Joe D started the holdout.
Yeah, no. So players were always holding out, and they were also looking to make more money. The Yankees' best player in the early days, Hal Chase, who was remembered and known for shady doings, he would every so often, especially if they were out of the race, which they usually were then, he would skip a game, go to New Jersey, and play a semi-pro game for like side money. And of course he's still playing. So they would do all kinds of things to try to make some extra money on the side and monetize their pay. But they were doing better than the average person was at any point. But compared to today, of course, it's just it's a shadow of the salaries that they get today.
Hey, Dom, reading your book, Dom, I found probably, I won't say the most interesting, but one of the things I never knew. And that was the new face of the Yankees before Babe Ruth. Now, this guy went on to become the founding father of football, was one of the greatest football coaches in the history of the football itself. So can you tell us about that guy just before Babe Ruth that couldn't hit a curveball?
Yeah, George Halas was his name, of course, more famous in football. George Halas, it's a kind of a staple of trivia question. Who was the Yankees' right fielder before Babe Ruth? And the answer being George Halas. That's not technically true. Halas was actually had gone to the minor leagues in 1919, and Babe Ruth actually started at other positions. So it wasn't like one didn't succeed the other. But with George Halas, obviously the Yankee scouts went out looking for talent, and most of the players then, would go from high school. They would sign with their local minor league team in the low minors, and they would be sold up the ladder until a major league team saw them and then would sign them. But the Yankees had heard about this guy playing at the University of Illinois And obviously he was more famous for football, but he was a really good baseball player. And he tore up the Big Ten or whatever they might have called the league then. That I don't know off the top of my head. But they signed him for, a few $1,000s. And, of course, there was no pro football. So even though he was a much better football player, he signed with the Yankees. Well, he finishes up his career in the Rose Bowl in 1919. He plays in the Rose Bowl. That year, the Rose Bowl was a military game coming out of World War I. It was like a Navy All-Stars and Army All-Stars. and he'd been playing for a naval base. And he was the MVP of the Rose Bowl. He intercepted a pass and returned it for a touchdown and caught a pass on offense for a touchdown. So he was the MVP. Oh. So when he shows up for training camp, maybe 6-7 weeks later, he's in football condition. And most of the players in those days that worked odd jobs in the offseason and didn't believe in weight training or anything like that, most players were out of shape. They came to training camp to get in shape. That was what spring training was really for. It's not like today. So here all these guys are kind of overweight and out of shape and slow and sluggish. This guy comes in college football shape. He's the MVP of the Rose Bowl. And he's a five-tool player. He hit for power, which in those days meant a lot of doubles and triples, but he could hit the ball over everybody's head in the outfield. He could run faster, probably the fastest guy on the team, had a shotgun of an arm, and it looked like he was a pretty good hitter. So he starts playing, and he's a switch hitter, which was very, very rare at that time. So much like the stories that you've probably read of spring training 1951, when Mickey Mantle kind of showed up, right. George Halas shows up in Jacksonville in spring training in 1919, and he just electrifies camp. The writers are talking about him, and they're writing about him every day. And Miller Huggins, who very rarely praised players anyway, especially young players, said, "Unless I'm wrong, this kid's a major league ball player, and he's going to be our right fielder." So by the end of camp, it looks like George Halas is going to be that big thing that the Yankees have been looking for a long, long time. Wow. That he was going to be their franchise star and a young star who never played anywhere else. Because then, as later on, they were trying to quick fix it by buying players who were past their prime. But now they had a guy that was a young guy and had never played anywhere else. So it was starting to create this big sensation. Well, he hits a ball over everyone's head in Jacksonville and legs out a triple and hurts himself. He hurts his hip. So he couldn't – now he had to sit out, and he wasn't really ready to play, and he couldn't run. And he ended up going to this doctor who specialized in hips they didn't have the kind of technology they do now. And the guy just was less a chiropractor. He snapped the hip back in place. Oof. And then Halas was okay. So he rejoins the Yankees in May, and now he's okay in terms of his speed, but now he's kind of exposed that he can't hit a curveball. So he got a couple of hits, and he stole a few bases, but he just could not hit a curveball. And so at one point, when they went to Detroit, the Yankees said, "Well, look, he's on the bench," and the Yankees said, "Well, look, you want to make yourself useful, drive Ty Cobb out of his mind. Just go call him every name in the book, get him out of his game, distract him." So George Halas is in the dugout screaming everything you could imagine at Ty Cobb when he comes to bat. And then Ty Cobb, he was starting to look at the dugout. Ty Cobb wanted to go crack his head open with his bat. So they agreed to meet outside after the game. And by the time they did, Ty Cobb had cooled off. And he said, "Listen, son, that's no way to act. That's no way to handle yourself on the field." And they had a long talk, and they became friends. And when the Tigers came to New York later that year, they actually met at the hotel in Manhattan, and they walked all the way uptown to the Polo Grounds, and talked things over. So they were actually friends, and Cobb tried to take him under his wing. But ultimately, the Yankees thought that Halas had tremendous potential, but he needed to spend some time in the minor leagues and to try to learn how to hit the curveball. And Halas came to the conclusion at this point that if he's going to go back to the minor leagues, because again, this is one of the most accomplished athletes in the United States. Let's try this football thing. A few players have gotten together. Let's try to launch a football league and play pro football. And that was ultimately he quit baseball, concentrated on football, and that's the rest was history. I think history shows he made the right decision. But you never know. You never know what a guy with tremendous power as a switch hitter who could run like he could run and was a first class athlete, what he might have done in Yankee Stadium when it was built a couple of years later. He might have been Mickey Mantle before Mickey Mantle, but he ultimately chose football and was probably. But yeah, very very much. You think when you read about his brief time in baseball, it's almost a little bit like Bo Jackson in that he had this tremendous speed and power that was unheard of in baseball, particularly at that time.
Oh, that's very 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 cool. I tell you, that's one of my favorite parts of the book. One more question for you from me anyway. Can you give us just like maybe two really colorful characters that played for the Yanks back then? I know there was a lot of drinking in bars and carrying on and stuff like that.
Well, there's a lot of that stuff going on, of course. The most probably one of the most colorful ones was one they picked up right off the bat. His name was Kid Elberfeld, and he was a shortstop, and they acquired him from the Tigers. And John McGraw, the major domo, of course, manager and basically the owner of the Giants, was furious that he ended up with the Yankees. I mean, because he was a McGraw kind of player. And he was kind of their firebrand, and they very nearly won. The closest they came to winning the pennant in the pre-Yankee days were 1904, 1906. And he was a star of both of those teams. Well, in 1906 on Labor Day, they're playing a crucial doubleheader against Philadelphia. And he gets into a fight with the umpire. And he gets so out of control that he runs up to the umpire, Silk O'Laughlin, and he tried to stomp on his foot with his spikes, which you could almost literally cut someone's foot off.
Yeah.
And he just kept trying to stomp on him. And it got so bad that the police had to come onto the field and drag Elberfeld off. And so they drag him off the field, and he goes outside on 168th Street, where the just outside the ballpark. I mean, they threw him out of the ballpark. And I guess between when they opened the gates for something to drag the field or something, he came running back on the field and attacked the umpire again. So they drag him off the field again. And again, baseball being baseball at that time, he played the second game of the doubleheader. He's in the starting lineup. Yeah. So he's right back on the field. And in that game, the A's got into an argument, and they ended up forfeiting it. So it was a crazy day. But ultimately, Elberfeld got suspended for 10 games after that.
Wow. And
those 10 games without him probably cost the Yankees the pennant in 1906. So he was just crazy. And, they made him the manager for a brief time. He was player manager in 1908. And in the off seasons when he was doing stuff around his home, he met a very young Casey Stengel, and he was kind of Casey Stengel's mentor. Wow. 1908, 1909, 1910. And when Casey Stengel got called up to the Dodgers in 1912, Kid Elberfeld gave him a suitcase to use. He gave him one of his old suitcases. But he was one. Hal Chase, who I mentioned, was probably their most notable player, but he was just a bad egg in every way imaginable. He was ultimately thrown out of the game for gambling, although they didn't formally say that. But he was accused of fixing games. Again, he would jump the team if he wasn't happy with his salary, go play for extra money on the side when he was supposed to be playing for the Yankees. He created all kinds of problems, and ultimately, the Yankees traded him away, and he had some decent years. But he was known at the time. People who saw him play compared him to Keith Hernandez at first base. He was really he was left-handed, which was unusual then, and he kind of showed how smooth a lefty first baseman could be. And he's many people now. Today's analytics applied to him suggest that he was overrated as a fielder, but he was undoubtedly, to the eyewitness, an extremely graceful fielder. But to skip way ahead, ultimately he drank himself to death. He got beriberi, which was a liver disease associated with drinking. And on his deathbed, he gave a long interview to the Sporting News in 1941, just regretting all the things he had done. At that time, the movie The Pride of the Yankees came out.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, they'll never make a movie like that about me because I don't have a good name like Gehrig did. I had it all and I threw it away. And it was really an incredible interview for the time, very candid about how much he had squandered. But certainly from 1905 to 1913, he was certainly the Yankees' best player, and one of the best players in baseball. Very, very respected in his time, but obviously getting kicked out like he did, he's been forgotten as far as being a Hall of Fame type player.
Oh.
And so those guys come to mind, and then the one that you might be the one you're referring to, but they had an outfielder named Ping Bodie. They had signed from San Francisco, and his real name was Francesco Pizzolo, but in those days, it wasn't the best thing to be associated with to be have an Italian name, especially so he changed his name to avoid a lot of controversy on the field. Well, only a few people knew what his real name was. So when he played with the Yankees, he was a voracious eater, especially in spring training, and he would go to Italian restaurants, of course, because he was Italian, and he was always talking about how he couldn't wait to get back to San Francisco so he could go to all his favorite restaurants. And this was during World War I. Food was rationed by the United States, so he was always complaining about that. So when the rations were lifted, spring training in 1919 in Jacksonville, there was an ostrich farm across the camp. And two writers, Bill McGeehan and Grantland Rice, obviously the famous one, would often walk out of spring training for a break and kind of lean over the fence and just watch the ostriches. So McGeehan got this crazy idea to write a tongue-in-cheek April Fool's type piece about an eating contest between Ping Bodie and the ostrich. and ostriches have multiple stomachs. They're known for eating a lot. So he wrote this whole piece about a contest in an auditorium that was packed, where they started eating spaghetti, and Ping Bodie would twirl it in his fork, and the ostrich would slurp it, bowl after bowl after bowl after bowl, and after the eighth bowl, the ostrich keeled over and dropped dead. So he writes this, and it's clearly tongue in cheek, because obviously even then, animal rights activists would have had their say.
Lost it.
Yeah, but it's interesting. You could find a lot of places that have been published or posted since then that wrote this as if it really happened.
Right.
Didn't realize it was. I think at the time people probably realized it, but it's kind of an urban legend that he actually had this eating contest with an ostrich and beat him and ultimately but it didn't. It was strictly an invention of a sports writer named Bill McGean, and he wrote it as I think he actually did write it on April Fools because spring training went into April then.
The ostrich's name was Percy, as a side note. Percy the ostrich.
Percy the ostrich. And in the newspaper, you could find a clip on the New York, I think it was the New York Herald or the Herald Telegram. And they had a drawing of an ostrich that they said, or a picture of an ostrich that they said was Percy. And you could see where somebody might actually take it seriously.
Right,
for sure.
But it was clearly tongue-in-cheek. So it was kind of the Sid Finch. I know if you're a Mets fan, it's kind of the Sid Finch of its day.
Right.
That's for Jim there. That's for you, Jim.
Yeah, we got
that was actually the very beginning of fake news.
Well, we have one final question for you before we let you go. We want to talk about current and just, with the Yankees, as you know, it's always World Series or bust. And, the team is one of the favorites, and it seems like all the outfielders are healthy if you've been watching the last 24 hours with Judge and Stanton and everybody. So really what I just want to ask is, what would you say is their biggest area of weakness or the one thing that could stop them from, winning the next title this year?
Well, of course, the biggest thing that could stop them is the fact that it's a 60-game season. I mean, there's no real margin for error. There's no way to recover from a slow start. I mean, think about even a 5 or 6 game losing streak, which any team could have any time, could put you in a very deep hole in a 60-game season. It would be like having a 15-game losing streak,
right?
In the context of a larger one. So that really is, and conversely, the Orioles could go have a 7 or 8 game winning streak, and all of a sudden they're in the playoffs, right? When they're the worst team in the world. So that 60-game team is a 60-game season is really an equalizer that is going to make it very tense and very tough on the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Astros, the teams that are favored. That's going to be very, very, very hard to, so they're going to have to be ready to go right off the bat.
Right.
And I think when you think about it, their big strength where they put their money in the offseason in Garrett Cole is their starting pitching. You've got Cole, Tanaka, and Paxton, who looks like he's going to be ready. Well, in the beginning of this season with the short camp, long layoff short camp, aside from the risk of injuries to pitchers, certainly those guys are not going to be able to go very deep into games the first 2 or 3 times around the rotation. You're talking about maybe 4 innings, 5 innings. You've got to stretch those guys out. And it may take you half of the 60 games before you really stretch those guys out. So the Yankees bullpen is really going to have to perform. They've got the talent down there to perform, but they can't afford a bad stretch. They can't afford Adam Ottavino to pitch as poorly as he did much of last season. They really need him. It would sure be nice if they had Betances back, if you had maybe 3 or 4 arms. So those things are, there's going to be a lot of pressure on bullpens early on. And bullpens, whatever they look like on paper, they're very streaky. They're very hot and cold. And if the Yankees bullpen is cold, they could find themselves in a very short time, 2-3 weeks, maybe too far behind to catch up, especially if somebody else gets hot. Right. So, the biggest obstacle for the Yankees, Dodgers, Astros is going to be the short season and the pressure that's going to put on certain areas of your team. Now the other side of the coin is with a short season, the Yankees might be able to just slug their way through it, right? They might be able to just hit so many home runs and win so many games 10-5 that they can't be caught. If you do that in a long season, the lack of pitching catches up with you by August. Now August is May. In fact, August is April. for the season.
Right.
So it's really a total wild card, and you never know what's going to happen. You can only figure that they should score a lot of runs, and whoever they throw out there pitching-wise should be able to give them 5 good innings and set them up. And then it's a matter of, again, their bullpen. It's just going to be a lot of pressure on them. They're going to have to perform.
Right. Well, this ain't a homer pick, but I think we'll see both New York teams in the playoffs. I'm very
well. You know what? What was the Mets' record the last 60 games last year?
It was one of the best in the sport. Maybe
it was 40-20.
Yeah.
Right, or 41-19.
It's like 20 games over. Yeah.
So yeah, if they ride that, and the equation's different. You're going to see Cespedes as the DH maybe, and which he might be able to. Of course.
Handle.
So he might be able to stay healthy in that role. Although you hate to not have his arm if he's on your team. But yeah, and of course the Mets have pitching. So even though they lost Syndergaard, so yeah, it's going to be it's going to be fun. And people have been asking me all week: is this going to mean anything? Is this championship going to have an asterisk on it? Does it mean anything if you win? And I think the answer is, of course, it's not going to have the same meaning for posterity's sake that a regular season would have. It's just something we're going to have to enjoy in the moment. That's all.
Of course.
Whoever wins, it's going to be fun for those fans, for that team. But I just think, if the Yankees get off to a terrible start and don't make the playoffs, is it even worth getting angry about it when they've only got to 60 games? I mean, yeah, you still will. That's baseball. But it's something that we're just going to have to kind of suspend disbelief and just enjoy the season that we're going to have.
Yeah.
And then see what happens next year. But
let me ask you one last thing before we go.
I have all day, guys.
Tell everybody what you're working on right now, where they can go to read anything you're working on. So if they're interested, they can follow you. Yeah, well,
of course, I still write for the Courant. You can see all my stuff there at www.current.com. I'm right now with the state of the newspaper business and sports. I'm pretty much writing the whole sports section at this point. I'm following just about everything. But I left the Yankees beat 8 or 9 years ago, and I've been the UConn men's basketball beat writer at the Courant since 2011. So you'll see all my stuff there. I'm always working on stuff like that. I do a weekly column on Connecticut sports people. And as luck would have it, the Yankees recently signed a guy from UConn. They have a catcher from UConn, Max McDowell, will probably be the fifth guy. But you never know. Guys are going to get hurt. You're going to have to dip down into what you have. So he's down there, and he's at Yankee Stadium catching Garrett Cole and all those guys. So I may find my way down there and dust off my writer's card and go down there and do that. So I'm working on that. But you'll see my stuff on mostly UConn sports, mostly UConn men's basketball, and you'll see that just about every day on current.com. So give that a check out. And of course, there's Franchise on the Rise.
Great book.
Still available on Amazon and anywhere where fine books.
Every fan has seen it because it's behind Mac.
Behind Mac every week.
Everybody. There you go. Well, we appreciate you taking some time to come on and some time out of your day. And thank you for giving us all the insight on stuff, especially that was before my time and I didn't know a lot about. And we wish you the best and hope to have you on in the future and enjoy your holiday.
Thank you, guys. Man. Thanks for having me. Great
Thanks,
time.
Dom. Take care.
Later, buddy.
So that's good. Okay. So Yankee stuff and, anytime. And I actually know it's hard not to know a lot about Yankee history because it's such a famous history. So it's always nice when he throws a name out there that I don't know.
Yeah.
Like Ping or Pong or whatever that guy's name.
Yeah, man. Ping, baby.
Child, I want to name it Ping now. I mean, Ping.
I mean, umpires beware, man. Holy Jesus.
When he said that, I was thinking Yasiel Puig, I was thinking would do something today. It just seemed like something you would do.
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah. So that was Dominic Amore who joined us. Again, he writes for the Hartford Courant. He also to cover the Yankees. minor league baseball. He covers the Yard Goats and UConn sports. You're listening to the Big Guy Sports Worldwide Network, New York Sports Radio. You can like us on Facebook and Twitter. You can follow us on Instagram at the Big Guy Sports. And we are live Monday, Tuesday, 4 to 6, Wednesday, 5 to 7, and Saturday and Sunday, 8:30 to 10:30. And if you like what you heard from Dominic, when I update the website next time, I will put a link over to his site where you can go and read some of his stuff. Mm-hmm. So, good stuff today. And we've got a lot of other baseball stuff to cover today as baseball has arrived. I want to slide in a little side note before we get into our Yankees and then some Mets stuff. They said that I think it was somewhere around now. There's about, I don't have the exact number, but there's over 1,500 ball players that needed to be tested. Only 35 of them became positive. That's not that bad.
Not really.
On average.
1,600. So, but interesting to note, and we can get more into this when we get to the Mets. One Met who's not, as you know, we discussed already, that the teams are not really technically allowed to tell you who tests positive for laws and protection and whatever reason. One Met notably not at camp is Ahmed Rosario. And now maybe he tested positive, maybe he didn't. I don't want to assume. But he's not at camp.
That's a big name.
Mets have not issued any statement, and he's not in a contract standoff because he's still got too many years. So we can get into that with the Mets, but that's something interesting to ponder. So as we start off the show, one of the first, if you're a Yankee fan, one of the things you got to be excited about is when you turned on the TV on Wednesday or you turned on the media on Thursday, and MLB, I don't know if y'all had a chance to look at it yesterday, but MLB Network yesterday had 24 hours of coverage where they were just running videos of showing people, working out. And these videos were blowing up because the Met one I shared on Facebook, I can't even tell you how many people watched that video just all over the world. That has nothing to do with my page. So Garrett Cole was on the mound, Yankee Stadium, throwing bullets.
Sir.
If you're a Yankee fan, let's start with Garrett Cole. You've got to be excited. Mac is going like this. Mac, you got to be happy. You see,
yeah.
Your $324 million pitcher is actually throwing BBs off a Yankee mound, and he's not wearing an Astro uniform when he's doing it.
That's true. He's already up to 95 through 99 miles per hour at some of his pitches. So they're pretty excited about the kind of shape he's in already. I guess he had a throwing program he went to after they kind of put the kibosh on the beginning of the season. So he's been throwing. And the only thing, of course, is to fine-tune his pitching, Matt. Just to make sure that he got that control, that he has his stuff. But his fastball's already there, so I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, and Matt, Matt, besides you being excited because you got the Yankee jersey on, you got the matching hat, your boy Mr. Cole's wife gave birth yesterday.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Garrett Cole. He's now a father.
Big time.
Hopefully he'll still play.
Our kids can be friends. Our kids can be friends. They'll grow up together,
Yes.
Yeah. Garrett, give me a call, man. We'll have a play date after August. Let me know.
Fly you on a private jet for a Saturday morning 2-hour soiree.
Listen,
Garrett
this
Cole,
guy,
doing what he's doing.
He's going to be a key to the Yankees' success in these 60 games, man. He's going to run a lot of innings. I think he's going to turn it up and run a lot of innings, and he's going to kind of push back against Boone and say, hey, man, let me sit out here for a little while, throw a couple more pitches, because that's just kind of the guy he is. He's going to want to take hold of this and be a main reason the Yankees succeed tremendously and win many, many of those 60 games. The Yankees are going to try to be a single-digit loss team, realistically, to get in there and have a solid locked spot in the playoffs with 60 games to go. I like Garrett Cole. I like the fact he's getting back healthy. The layoff really helped him out, and we're ready to rock and roll, man. Garrett Cole will take the Yankees where they need to go.
Dominic brought an interesting point up that I think none of us really thought of it because our minds had been so preoccupied with let's just hope they play. And then you forget the fact that when they played spring training games last, that was months ago. And we forget, and he brings up an interesting point, I didn't even think of this, is that, I mean, Mac, you have to worry a little bit that he's right. I mean, usually when you go into spring and you have those games where, the pitcher throws 40 pitches, then he comes out, throws 60, and he kind of works his way up. They're not having those games this time around. So maybe a Garrett Cole and a Jacob DeGrom, maybe they go into the season in the first couple starts, they can only throw 65, 70 pitches.
Right.
So if you're a team, if I'm playing, the Yankees or I'm playing the Mets in the beginning and I'm facing one of those two aces, I'm telling my hitters, if I'm the manager, be very patient. Because if you get like a 25-35 first inning out of one of those guys, 3-4 innings later, they're gone. And you'd rather take your chance against the bullpen anyway.
Yeah, I mean, they are scheduled. Supposedly, they're going to work. When I was talking to Cashman, they are supposedly going to do those 3 exhibition games at the end of the year. But that does not even cover. Yeah, cover to what they normally do during spring training. So, I mean, he made a great point. Just as you're following up with, I mean, if say Cole's ready to go, but Tanaka's not. He needs some time to get up to a pace. Paxton isn't, an overpowering pitcher. So, he uses a lot of control. If his control is off and he's not throwing good, I mean, then we're going to have to go right to the bullpen. And if somebody like the Orioles gets hot, 7-8 games, and we're cold for 7-8 games. That's
grace to the playoff.
I like what Cole is bringing, man, because he's working with Ottavino, he's working with Otero, all these guys like that, and he's going to do is teach those young guys and teach these guys things that he's used in his trade for so long to be so successful over where he's been, especially over in Houston. And that's only going to carry over to the rest of our staff, and I think they're going to be okay. I have a lot of high hopes for the Yankees bullpen this year. We got some holes they need to fill, but Garrett Cole is going to be a leader, and he's going to help those guys develop big time.
Well, I want to ask you, Matt, about somebody else, another one of your favorites. I've seen that, I'm sure you've seen the videos. Aaron Judge looks pretty healthy to me. I mean, he looks like he's depositing balls over there.
He looks the part. He looks healthy. Aaron Judge looks healthy, and it looks like he's getting back moving and getting back going. But we really just have to wait and see when he starts making impact. He's going to lay it all out on the line when he's out there in the field, and he's gonna be torquing his body, swinging that bat, and we're going to see if it affects him. We're going to see if it affects his swing. We're going to see if it affects his effectiveness in the outfield, if he's still willing to go make those plays against the wall.
If you're the Yankees, you could kind of split him a little bit and give him every few days, let him DH, and just.
Yeah, for sure. The Yankees have enough depth.
Clint Frazier run those balls down.
Yeah. The Yankees have enough depth where they could do that. But, I mean, I don't know how many balls you want Clint Frazier running down because sometimes
really none, but, I mean, options are options.
They confused sometimes. So the more Aaron Judge is just healthy, the time off is good for him. It's going to benefit a lot of guys having that time off, that layoff. They're going to come back healthy. They're going to come back ready to rock and roll.
The Yankees were going to play their last 60 games originally very undermanned. And they were.
Yeah, exactly.
And to be honest with you, just speaking on behalf of the Yankee fans, I'm sure they would agree with me, is they're probably perfectly fine with Clint Frazier kicking a few balls around the outfield, 1 or 2 a week, if it means Aaron Judge makes it through the whole season healthy. I mean,
to the playoffs, yeah.
Well, not only that, guys. A lot of teams, including Yankees, I mean, they do have depth, and they do have just defensive specialists that can come in at the end of the game if they're ahead, that can take some of these starting players, regular players out, and give them that rest, so that when we do push and we do that sprint. I mean, I think a lot's going to be managing strategy this year of when you pull your regular players out and put your bench in, and how to rely on your defensive specialists at the end of the game when you're ahead. I think the managing coach is going to be a lot this year in this shorter season.
Gotcha. Yeah. Want to move on to another Yankee topic with Hal Steinbrenner. So he made an interesting comment. And I tend to believe rich people before I believe poor people. No offense to anybody, but I mean, because they have inside information. And if we're being honest here, money buys you a lot of things. It buys you political ties. It buys you, you throw someone money and they're in an office of political power. Sometimes they change their mind on thinking.
Access.
So access we don't have, my my cupboard full of Oreo cookies is not getting me a meeting with the mayor. So anyway, Hal Steinbrenner says he feels at some point this season there will be fans in the stands, and he expects before the season's over that Yankee Stadium at some point will be able to put 20 to 30% capacity into the stadium. So we're going to, Mac, let me ask you, what do you think about that? Do you think that's actually true, or has Hal just been inside too much?
He's been working with Cuomo, but that's, again, I think that's opinion. They even got diagrams with Ticketmaster working where they got, where people can sit and how they're going to sell tickets. And I mean, listen, I would love to see something like that taking place, but I mean, with the social distancing and the mask and stuff like that. But I mean, when you're out there before the game, and people got to follow these things. I don't know. I mean, I hope it's true. It'd be exciting to see fans in there. But there's so many stuff that you are going to have to take into consideration. Testing at the gate, I would imagine they would have to do. I mean, I don't know. That sounds like a lot to me, Jim.
Is it even worth it, to be honest with you, if you look in the stands? And Matt, I want to ask you this: if you're looking in the stands and you've got, first of all, I would assume they're not going to let anyone sit in the first couple rows. They don't want anybody breathing on any players. You don't want like Aaron Judge standing in the batter's box and he's got a fan behind him trying to get an autograph and breathing on
right.
So if you push them back a little bit, and then how the stadium is, it's in sections.
Yeah.
And if in every section you only have 3 or 4 fans, is that even worth it? I mean, it's like almost going on a plane and you get first class to yourself. Put my feet.
I mean, it makes no difference. It's better than nothing, though, because if you could have a couple thousand people in a stadium just making a little bit of noise and enjoying the game, the guys will appreciate that, Ron. Because there's a lot of guys talking about how tough it's going to be to play without fans in the building. There are a lot of guys that are motivated by that per se. The cheering and the booing and all that. So we'll see. I think they'll tarp off the first couple of sections, first couple of rows all the way around and just start seating people sporadically all the way up. They can fit a good bit of people in there if they just space. Even if it's just 2 seats between a fan and they say, okay, every third seat we can put a butt in. Yeah. There'll still be a lot of people in that stadium one way or the other.
Well, the reason I mentioned before the money and the influence is because, we talked about on one of the shows during the week how, we had the breaking news while we were on the air, how New York said no fans would be allowed in any events. And then Hal comes out a few days later and says, well, I think I'll see fans. So, I'm sure Hal has access to the governor and all these other people in the state of New York to kind of sit and talk privately. So maybe there's something that we don't know that they know. But if he does, Jim, why say that out loud? If Cuomo said that, hey, you have a shot at putting fans out there, when he just said no fans, doesn't that kind of put pressure on Cuomo right Maybe
now?
That's what he wants. I mean, who's got more? Let's be honest here. I hate to say this, but the Yankees are beloved in New York.
Yeah.
Who's got more power, the Yankees or the mayor or the governor?
But what I mean the opposite of that too, Jim. All these people that are fighting against, people coming out and doing these things, all these groups and all these social groups. Putting the governor on the spot instead of just letting it happen and maybe this happening. Why announce that to get some fuel to the fire is all I'm saying.
I want to bring up a quick point. So Michael is in the comments and he keeps saying he's all totally against sports and fans coming in and all this other stuff. Michael, we're always going to, there's nothing mad about putting fans in the stands, Michael, because you're saying to yourself, oh, don't put people in the stands. Have you looked at the New Jersey beach? I live in New Jersey and I'm on Facebook right now and they were packed on the boardwalk person to person.
Sitting here in Florida.
So I don't want to hear about don't put people in the stands. Oh, baseball player. I don't care, Michael. Because the reason I don't care and I value your opinion is because if you're telling me it's okay for us common folk to go to the beach and to go to the store and to go to work and get sick, then I want the baseball players out there. Because if you think there'll ever be a day where I'm going to sit here and tell you that rich people could stay home while not rich people can go out and get sick, that'll never happen.
Yeah.
Never get me to say that. So if you want to sit and say, and again, I value your opinion that baseball players shouldn't play and this and that and football and baseball, then go out and also say that all these people shouldn't be going to work. Because I'm not putting hundreds and millions of people's lives at risk for an economy while they sit home. Sorry.
I agree completely. I live in Florida myself. Michael, I get what you're saying, and don't take my statement as saying that I think that the stands should be full and people should be out in public in groups. I don't. I think everybody needs to kind of follow what's going on and follow these other countries and places that have gotten this under control, and let's keep it moving. And we got to get on top of it so we can have our sports. But if it comes down to it, and we can put 1,000 people or 1,500 people or 3,000 people in a stadium, then let's do it and let's move forward. Get your waivers out there, get your testing done. Tell these people, hey, look, you know the risk you're running if you're coming out here, and we're just going to have to accept it for what it is. If you want what you want, you're going to have to make some sacrifices.
Yeah, see, I agree with Michael on Michael's point about he mentioned in the comment it's not about rich or poor, it's human life. I agree with you 100%, but I'm of the mindset that it works one way and one way only, Michael. Either everybody goes out, which means if we're all going out, they play, or they don't play and we don't go out.
Yeah, Jimmy, let me
or nobody. And I'm with you, Michael. If you want to tell me, listen, if you want to say that the players shouldn't be playing because it's not safe, then I'm okay. Then shut down the sports, but also tell everyone to stay home and start feeding people money on a monthly basis to survive.
Because pay the bills and leave us home.
Because we're not guinea pigs for $40 million a year people. Sorry.
Right.
I
agree.
Let me follow up on that one quick second. I mean, we got to stop with the idol worships, all right? We got to stop putting the players higher than us. They're entertainers. They're there for us. They're there for our enjoyers. But they're human beings just like we are. And as Jim and Matt have said, man, listen, if I got to go to work every day and put my life at risk and my family's life at risk, as you think it does, if that's your thoughts, well, then listen, then so does everybody else. I'm sorry. That's the way life is. And if you want to play a sport that is non-essential, this is what it is. I swear to God, it's non-essential when it comes to work. So is mine. I work in a restaurant. I'm feeding people that don't want to cook at home. Let me tell you something. Everybody out there has a job to do. I know there are entertainers that we love them, but listen, they're human beings. And there's no reason, if people can go to the beach right now without getting arrested and without people saying something, there is no reason these baseball players can't play baseball and that you can't have some fans in there.
They were posting pictures last night, Mac, I live by the Jersey Shore, so I'm well aware of how it gets during the 4th of July. New York comes and crowds the New Jersey beaches. It's typical. We've always dealt with it. Anyone who lives around here like myself knows that this is the time of year in the summer where weekends get really crowded because you got New Jersey people going to New York. And if you looked at the pictures from the helicopters last night on the news, the Broadwalk was bumper to bumper people, 6 feet at all on the Broadwalk. So, it is what it is. But anyway, on that note, I want to talk about the Yankees injury news because it's looked very positive. Like, it's very positive. I mean,
it's getting much better.
Yeah, because you knew you weren't getting Severino this year. So that, you don't get upset about it. You knew you weren't getting Herman this year because he's got to serve the suspension. Can't be going around beating people. So, everybody else, though, is looking really good. I'll go around Mac. Hicks is looking good. Again, like Matt touched base earlier, you're not going to know about Judge until you see how he is in the field. But I feel better about it than I felt 2 weeks ago when I didn't hitting. Paxton's back. Even if Paxton's one of those guys who the first 2 or 3 starts can only throw 50, 60 pitches. It's a lot better to put him out there for 50, 60 pitches than Lord knows who else you would put. So
I mean,
happy?
Yeah, I mean, we discussed that conference we had with Cashman, the phone conference, and it was pretty much the same except only better on the Judge front. I mean, with him out there going ahead and taking swings from a live pitcher, which what he was talking about, and he's doing it, is very impressive. Stanton still it's not so much his bat, it's his calf injury that the base running at DH that they're concerned about. So until they get him really running around the bases at full speed, they're not going to know about that. Mm-hmm. But Jim, the news is exciting right now for the Yankees.
Yeah, it looks really good, man.
Stanton was looking ripped.
Yeah, well, he's had nothing else to do except sit there and upper body work. His legs probably that big around right now. He can't, But look,
probably
it does.
A snake in a fight. I mean,
the Yanks were going to limp into those last 60 games. They really were. They were going to limp in, and this actually benefits them big time. With Stanton, that's fine. Hicks can look good. That's great. Voit, all his
center fielder. Hicks.
Well, yeah, that's all good and fine, really, man. What's going to really hurt, I believe, still is just not having Severino for the season. People are kind of overlooking how serious that is for you and how long and how much of an impact that's going to have. They're going to miss him big time. That's a lot of strikeouts. That's a lot of wins right there off your record, and a lot more pressure is going to go on the top three of your starters now the rest of your bullpen. Now you don't have that fourth guy, fifth guy that is going to come in there and shut it down for you. So, albeit good news for the Yankees, still, a little bit of a grim outlook for me as far as after the number 3 in pitching. I have no real faith in J.A. Happ and Jordan Montgomery if they want to use them as starters. So, we'll see.
Listen, I could start. I throw solid between 35 and 40 miles an hour.
I'm ready now, Jim. I'm ready now. Get me out there.
Knuckleball. You learn how to
R.A. Dickey it.
Throw that knuckler, man. You don't have to throw hard at all, man.
All right, so one last topic on the Yankees here. Not a big deal, but the Cardinals have replaced the Yankees in the Field of Dreams game. It's an exhibition game. I mean, it is what it is. That's the smart move. I mean, you can always bring the Yankees back there next year because now they've gone out and basically made it like a complete place to watch a game type feel. And it's better to send them there when it's safer. The Cardinals and the White Sox are in the same little area now. So, they took them out. It's not a huge deal. I mean, right? I mean, it's an 8,000 seat venue that they can't even fill all the way now. So not a big deal, right? I mean,
you can go down to that plantation in Georgia that the Yankees used to play.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's a great concept, right? That one of the greatest baseball movies of all time, The Field of Dreams. It's a beautiful story. Wish we could be there. But, whatever. I mean, it is what it is. And at least they're going to have a game, at that venue, which is nice.
We could be there. I'll pick you guys up in a van and Matt will have to come meet us halfway and then we'll leave his car somewhere and,
Let's get one of them. Go ahead, Matt.
I'll meet you in Kentucky.
Let's get one of them. Let's get one of them old VWs, like from the '60s with flowers on it and stuff like that. We'll bring our own
Field of Dreams. That's what they drove in.
Right.
He picked up the writer, and then they put him in one of those old things that the hippie guys used to drive when they were doing their Woodstock pot smoking, and he drove him up to the thing.
Hey,
sounds like my kind of van. I'm good with that.
We could bring our own stash or whatever, just have a great time.
I don't know. It's just it's. I didn't look at it as a big deal. I mean, to me, it's like it was more as a fun game anyway.
It's a vanity thing.
Yeah, if everything's good next year, because they upgraded it. Now it has 8,000 seats, and they were having bigger plans for that than just one game. They were probably going to do a few every year. If everything's healthy next year, the Yankees can go back there next year. I mean, that's who you want to see anyway. You'd love to see the Yankees and the White Sox, who are represented in the movie, playing over there, and that'd be great. So
that'd be awesome.
Not the end of the world, and the Yankees will be out there as soon as everyone can go safely everywhere. The Yankees are going to be one of the first teams they throw out there for that vanity game.
Definitely cool.
So, good news, Mets fans. Well, it could be good news.
Possibly.
The company that represents the Wilpons, because they obviously, when you're getting these kind of offers, you have to hire somebody to field the offers and put them together. Things started to move quickly towards the end of June. Towards the end of June, the MLB pre-approved 7 people, which is basically the MLB's way of saying, we've done our background on you guys, not who you are as people, but we know you have the funds, because you got to make sure that you're going to pre-approve people that are not going to come in and say, oh, yeah, I'll pay $2 billion, but they're only worth $40,000. You don't want to have that, or even people like me throwing bids in there. So they pre-approved a bunch of people to make bids. And then because the Wilpons are working really hard, because even once you accept a bid, the MLB's got to vet. Then you got to get all the money together. And there's a lot of documents that go into these kind of deals. We're not talking about someone selling think of how much documents you got to sign when you buy a $300,000 house. They're talking about selling a $2 billion team. So they tell them, get your bids together, by July 9th. because they want to get everything started processing, because the idea is to have the new owner in place for next year's business cycle, free agency, who to re-sign, all this other stuff. So they're working on the bids. Everybody's got to have a bid in on the 9th. Now, here's the thing, is I think I could speak on this amongst the three of us probably the best because I'm such a pain-suffering Met fan. Number one, there's only one thing that really concerns me about the Wilpons. Just one. Because the Wilpons tend to say something that makes you think, oh. A couple weeks ago, they talked to Jeff Wilpon, and he says, we expect to get some bids soon, but, and anytime someone uses the word but, he says, we don't know what they're going to be or how it's going to break down. Now, if I rewind to you real quick, and we've gone over this before, but I'll just rewind for anybody new. When Steve Cohen offered $2.6 billion, the deal, he was willing to give the Wilpons SNY, which is a moneymaker. SNY makes more money than the team. But he got upset because they wanted 5 years of still running it, and it fell apart. So when he left the table, the Wilpons hired this company to come in and vet offers. Allen and something. He hired them and said, Allen and Company, and said, we're okay selling it, and for the, we're okay if we won't control the team. I don't know where SNY is, or we don't need SNY. So anyway, fast forward, 7 people are pre-approved. By July 9th, the bids will be in. By the end of July, you should know who's buying the team, because it sounds like they're still going to get some good offers. So I want to go down here on this. And I got to be honest with you, one of the bids is the A-Rod group with J-Lo and the other business partners. It's a serious bid because a rumor is they can bid $2 billion. So
they're going to get it.
I'm going to tell you why I think they won't, but I'll tell you that in a minute. But anyone who thought that the A-Rod and J-Lo thing was just for show and they would never come close to the right bid, $2 billion is where you need to be. Because right now the Mets' value has fallen to about 1.8, 1.9. So people should start to get a little bit understanding that. We'll start with you, Mac. I want to talk about these guys before I get to the other one. That's a real possibility. A-Rod, J-Lo, and their team could own the Mets.
Definitely. I mean, they got really solid financial bids behind them. I think Vitamin Water's involved in it as one of the partners, if I read it right. And they got another. I'm trying to remember if the Panthers owner. Am I reading it right? Florida Panthers owner is also involved.
Contributing 50 to A-Rod's bid. Yeah.
So I mean, you got maybe only, and that's not a lot of people because you can figure J-Lo and A-Rod is really one person, right? They're that. So you got 3 people, which is not a very complex, right? That's not a complex circle of people to work with. It's only 3 people. And I think too, as we go through this, Jim, too, I think it's going to be a lot to do with personalities getting along, because I know this company is the one that's representing, the Wilpons. But if Cohen and some of the other guys, or maybe the team, that Blitzer team there, if they kind of rub wrong with Wilpon, and A-Rod rubs right because he's a New York Met fan also, J-Lo's a huge name. I mean, if that personality's rubbed right, do you think that maybe that might have something to do with the sale too?
Well, the thing is, because I want to ask Matt on something, right, that the thing is with this is that as a group, I'm sure they put together a foundation of how they're going to run things. Like with Jeter, when Jeter bought the Marlins, other people put more money in than he did. Mm-hmm. But as part of the deal, he was the guy who would run the team. So they were the money guys, and he was the brains guys, because he didn't put as much money in as the other investors. And if it was broken down by money, he wouldn't be making any decisions. He'd be a silent partner. It's the same thing with this. They're putting together a business plan and a team, but if it passes, A-Rod would be the decision maker. He would be the front. And but here's my thing before, and I want to give this to Matt. I disagree with you on the A-Rod thing, because if you look, well, first of all, there's 7 bids, right? There's 7 bids. Now, some of them some of them we don't are kind of weird, and I think they'll fall off. Like there's a couple guys who are making bids who are bidding on the Mets, but they also want the Wilpons to include other real estate holdings because the Wilpons have a lot of real estate holdings. And I don't think those will be taken seriously because I don't think the Wilpons are looking to sell every business they own. I don't think they're looking to dump their real estate holdings. They want to leave money to their kids and whatnot. But Steve Cohen, the guy who offered 2.6, is said to be back in the mix. He was pre-approved, and he's going to make an offer. He's just waiting to see where the other offers come in. And I still think it's going to wind up with him because I think that if A-Rod's group bids $2 billion, Matt, Steve Cohen can just come in because he's got more money than anyone bidding and say, all right, I'll give 2.2.
No, he's not. They're not going to know what the bids are. They're not going to publicize it. No, it's going to be blind. They're going to turn in their bids, and the Wilpons are going to decide. The fact of the matter, in my opinion, is I think that the local and state governments are going to have some input on who takes the team over and what they're going to do with the field and with the grounds around the field. And I think that matters as well. And I think they will have an influence as to who the Wilpons sell to. I believe with the links to the city that Jennifer Lopez and Alex Rodriguez have and their plans for the facilities and stuff like that to bring in minority-owned businesses, to ingratiate the community into the team and vice versa, I think they'll be the ones most qualified to elevate the city and the surrounding area and to bring the business in. They know they have their finger on the pulse of the area and the people that support the team. A-Rod is a lifelong Mets fan. Now, granted, they might not have the capital.
A lifelong Met fan.
Yeah. So they might not have the capital that a Steve Cohen has, but I think after vetting and it's more than just who has the money to spend. It's who has the money to spend and what are they going to do with the community? What are they going to do with the players? What's their plan for marketing? What's their plan for businesses in the area and infrastructure? And I think Jennifer Lopez and Alex Rodriguez, with the team they have with the founder of Vitamin Water and the Florida Panthers owner, they definitely can put together a great, solid plan for the
Can I ask you a follow-up? I want to follow up with Matt here for a second. All right. You know who Steve Cohen is, right?
Yeah.
You know that the show Billions is loosely after him, right?
Right.
Team Billions. Basically, where there were people in the past when he was on his way to his $4 or $6 billion fortune who said, he had probably inside trading information and whatnot, yada, yada, yada. With no big deal because MLB's already pre-approved him. You honestly don't believe that he has inside information on what the bids are going to be? I absolutely think he does.
I mean, I'm sure it's discussed and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, he might not – a guy like Cohen might not see it as worth the hassle if he's not getting – a guy like Cohen's going to want it all. Like you said, like how Rubin Brothers are looking for the real estate holdings and they got this other real estate company in Canada that's making a bid. They want the real estate holdings, things like that. And if the Wilpons are not willing to give up not just the Mets, but the Mets and SNY and ownership and real estate holdings and other businesses in the area they control and own, then Cohen might not be interested. Cohen might say, this is not a big enough blip on my radar to even deal with this. Hand it off to somebody that knows baseball, Alex Rodriguez. Hand it off to somebody that's from the area, Jennifer Lopez, and let's roll from there. And I think it would be the right move for the Mets and the Wilpons to allow the local and state governments to kind of have a say as to who buys the team and what they're going to do.
Can I say something real quick? Listen, I agree with Matt, great points on the community and stuff like that. But I believe that if Cohen is going to go in there, he's going to talk as much about the surrounding community as A-Rod and Jennifer. He may not have the exact grassroots contacts they do. But It's a great point you bring up. But I would imagine anybody that buys the Mets has got to go and talk to Cuomo, has got to talk to the mayor of New York City, has got to talk to the city councils, and they're going to want to find out what their plans are for that area because, the area around the baseball, it's got to be in some way, it's going to be, all that's going to be associated with the Mets.
And let's not forget one thing again. Nobody, and I'm going to name the 5 people that have been identified out of the 7 because I want to put you guys on the spot to tell me who's going to get it. Nobody in the group who's making a bid has as much money as Cohen. They're not even close. So I still think he's got the most power. He's from New York, Cohen. So the only difference between him and J-Lo and A-Rod is J-Lo and A-Rod are more celebrity figures. than Cohen. Cohen's got the sources, he's got the money, and he makes enough money that he could sit down with anybody he wants. He can get a meeting with Cuomo probably in an hour if he wanted to. So here's the 5, and then you're going to tell me who's getting it. You can only pick one. All right. The interesting parties are we'll just call it the A-Rod group, Harris Blitzer Entertainment, Steve Cohen, the Rubin brothers, and a private company from Canada are the 5 main people that are talked about. Give me Matt. Who's getting it? You going A-Rod?
It's going to be the A-Rod group. I'm so set on that A-Rod group getting that sale just because I know how that community feels about them and they love them and they're going to have a lot of say. They're going to have a lot of say and they're going to influence the decision.
Matt, who's getting them?
Well, can I ask a question real quick? Who's donating most of the Cuomo re-election campaign? Is what I want to know before I
public yet. But
hey, listen, I'm with Matt. I'm going to pick I think Cohen's would be my second choice, but I'm going with A-Rod and J-Lo.
So I'm going to go with Cohen then. So we got 2 A-Rods, 1 Cohen. All right, fair enough. So. Good news is that by the end of this month, hopefully it won't be the Wilbots. Oh, and let me listen. Can I give one advice to Met fans real quick before we move on? This is very important. Yankee fans will not understand this, but please, if you're a Met fan, when they announce in the news who's getting the Mets, do me a favor. Don't go on Facebook and celebrate. Don't go on Twitter and celebrate. Last time years ago, that the Wilpons were going to sell a majority stake in the team. They weren't selling the whole thing. They were selling a majority stake. The minute the fans found out, they celebrated on social media. And when the guy went to a Met game and the camera panned to him, they gave him a standing ovation. And then the Wilpons got jealous that they weren't loved and they backed out. So let's use reverse psychology, Met fans.
On the Wilpons.
Hear who's buying the team. Go on to Facebook and tell the Wilpons that it sucks and you'll miss them. So they sell it, and then we'll celebrate. Then we'll dance in the streets. Please. Do it. That's all I'm asking.
That's a good idea, Jim. That's a good idea. That might be the only hope that the Mets actually have to make this work.
All right, so Robert's with me on Cohen. So we got 2-2. All right, so let's move on to the next topic here.
Is it not funny that anyone else's name is Bobby Bonilla?
Yeah, I never even thought of that because he always puts Robert. But, yeah, maybe that's distinction. He probably doesn't get Bobby Bonilla's paycheck on July, but, you know.
Yeah, he won't get all his hate mail either, so that's pretty –
He doesn't get hate mail from me. I think he was smart. But so big thing for the Mets this year, and I really hope this kid gets a shot because – one of the things that worries me about selling the Mets is like when you buy the team, you know, depending on who buys it, you want your people. You want your manager, your GM, your coaches. You want to put your stamp on the team. Luis Rojas, the new Met manager, I think is the goods. And I hope he gets an opportunity. I really do. I hope that they don't come in and just, you know, clean house. This is a guy who, you know, he's from the Alou tree. We all know about Felipe Alou and the great manager he was. We all know about Moises Alou and his talent. We all know about the great job Rojas did in the minor leagues. He's worked with a lot of these guys, McNeil, Alonso. He was their coach, Nimmo. He's coached in other leagues and won titles. He's won manager of the year. The only thing you can knock about him is he's only 38. And that's not even a knock because I'd rather have a young coach than some 65-year-old stumbling around who needs a nurse to follow him around. So Luis Rojas, do you feel he has a lot of pressure on him or no? Because I kind of feel like it all depends who buys the team. And what I mean by that is like when you said A-Rod and J-Lo, who both come from a Spanish background, which is also what Rojas comes from. I think if A-Rod and J-Lo wound up with the team, I think Rojas is safe. Say what you want. I mean, Spanish background, you know, kind of respect the cultures. It's how people are, you know, as opposed, you know what I mean? So, Mac, you know, Rojas, a lot of pressure because the team's being sold to win right away or no?
Well, he ain't showing it, is he? He's out to sea on his boat, and nobody could get in contact with him. I mean, he's just relaxing. When they shut down the thing, he went out to sea, I think, and just finally has got back to the coaches and had a meeting. I mean, nobody can contact this guy. I love his attitude. It's like, all right, we're not playing ball. I'll see you, see you when we're coming back. Gets on his boat, he's gone. I like that attitude. I like the way he's. That's just calm. He's not sitting home worried. I mean, that's just a great trait to have. Yeah, Jim. He was a winner in local levels. He's worked with all these players. Even if Cohen owns the team, he's got to look at that. I mean, he's probably already. If you're going to plan on buying something, you're looking at all the goods already anyway. So this guy has been a winner. He's young, like you say. He can grow with the team. He can grow with the guys. I think it's a great hire, and he should. I think he should. No matter who buys the team, should be there.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, listen, look, I love the hire. I think this was the right hire for the Mets. You bring in a guy that he communicates with the players. They've all emphasized that already just based on what they know about, like what they've interacted with him. He listens to them. He takes their suggestions. He puts them in comfortable positions to where they can succeed. And, just even implementing things in practice, and just even today at spring training, they're already reporting about changes they made to drills that the players suggested that helped them and things like that. And when you have that and your players are comfortable with your leadership, then they succeed, they thrive. And I think that's what's going to happen. And I believe that regardless of who buys it, they'll see that, that Luis Rojas has an effect on the team that previous managers haven't had for the Mets. And they need that, and they have to utilize that in the transition of ownership. Use the person that's already there that has good standing with the players and the team to transition them through the new ownership change and where things might go from there. And I think Luis Rojas has the trust of the players right now, and I think is the right guy in the right place at the right time.
And you got to respect the guy who says his favorite book that he read was the one written by Duke coach Mike Krzyzewski. Yeah, not respect that guy. So just on a side note, one of our people on Facebook, Ernie, writes, we talk about the New York Giants. I loved your last show. Ernie, tomorrow is football. Sundays is football. So we will be talking about the Giants, I'm sure, plenty tomorrow and all your football needs. But today is baseball. So I like Rojas, and I hope he gets a chance. Like, I hope not just – I know he's going to coach this year because the sale will not even take place until the end of the year by the time we do the paperwork, but more than a one-year shot. I've been telling anyone who would listen to me for years now that the Mets needed to bring in a young guy, the player's age. Like, I'm just over the old people who have had 95 chances. Like, I'm not taking anything away from Dusty Rhodes, right? Is that his name? Dusty? Did I say his
Dusty
name?
Rhodes is a wrestler.
Dusty, you mean Dusty Baker? Dusty Baker.
I have something on the mind, man. I was just watching AEW. So
Dusty Baker,
baby.
Dusty
Baker.
Well, his son is a big picture in AEW. I was watching.
I love this dude. Go ahead.
Sorry, my mind was on AEW for a second. But so I'm okay with people like that. But at the same time, it's like, how many times can you go down the same road? You know what I mean? We don't need a 70-year-old coach in here anymore.
Well, Jim, there's nothing wrong with an older coach that's player friendly and that can teach some things that maybe they don't teach anymore to help them. But I agree with Rojas right now. The only thing I can see that might stop that is if they hire they're going to hire a new GM. What does that GM want? What does he think of Rojas? I figure that'll be a big meeting there, and hopefully he gets to know Rojas a little bit, the work he's doing with the players, because I really believe this is going to be a really good hire for these guys.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be. It was a good hire, and it's a shame. I thought Beltran would have done a good job too. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to take anything away from Beltran. I thought he would have did a good job too. I mean, circumstances are what they are, and he decided to resign. But when he resigned, and they talked about Dusty Baker because he hadn't signed on yet at the time. The Astros, I believe, is where he went. And they had talked about, some other guys. Like, they had thrown some other names on there, and I didn't want any of them. I was like, give it to Rojas. Give it to the young guy. He's got a feel for the players. They respect him. Yep. That's the way it should go. And I'm very excited to see how he does it. One of the things, like you just mentioned, Mac, one of the things I love about him is how calm he is. Yeah. You said, he's like, oh, all right, well, they're going to lock everyone down. They're not going to let us work out. I could sit in the city and do interviews all day and make it sound like, oh, we don't know what we're going to do. How are we going to handle this? What are we going to do? But I'm going to just go chill. Go chill. Yeah. Okay.
The biggest obstacle for the Mets in these next 60 games, if they play, is going to be the Atlanta Braves. All right. If they can just get over that Atlanta Braves hump, because let me tell you, being in that division with this young Braves team for the next couple of years is going to be really tough for the Mets. It's going to be really tough for the Mets.
Get the Braves. I beat the Braves.
I expect you to say that, Jimbo. I expect you to say that, big guy. But listen, the fact of the matter is the Braves are one of the top-tier up-and-coming teams in this league right now, and they're going to give the Mets a run for their money.
Yeah. Well, I think you can't sleep on any team, really. I think that I'm always of the mindset, and I've always been like this, even after the Yankees win the title, that you're the champ until someone else is the champ. So I'm not going to discount the Nationals. I mean, we could sit here and say, oh, they lost Rendon, but that's the only person they lost. They didn't lose the guys who won them the World Series, Scherzer, Strasburg, and Corbin. Mm-hmm. And as long as you have those top three, you're going to compete because that's as good a top three in the league as anybody. So I'm not discounting the Phillies because if Aaron Nola pitches like he's supposed to pitch, which he did in the second half, he's still an ace. And the Phillies, you want to talk about lineups. You talk about the Yankees lineup. You talk about the Dodgers lineup. The Phillies are right there.
Yeah, they have a lineup too.
They have a ton of hitting, with Harper and Real Muto and all those other. You can't count them out. Because if they get on a hot streak, especially in a 60-game season where they're hitting a lot of home runs, like Dominic was talking about with the Yankees and the home runs, Philly's a bandbox, dude. You check swing, the ball goes out. So I'm not counting any of them out. To me, you look at the 10 teams that are playing each other in our divisions, and the only two teams who shouldn't do much are the Marlins and the Orioles. Mm-hmm. Every other team, Phillies, Nationals, Mets, Braves, Yankees, Blue Jays, Rays, Red Sox can all knock you off. So,
one of the toughest groups in baseball right now.
In baseball, by far. I mean, I don't want to. I'd rather play the Marlins 6 times than the Yankees. I mean, why?
I would imagine.
I'm sure the Yankees are rather times than the Mets. I mean, say what you want. They could think, well, we're well above the Mets, but would you rather play a guaranteed almost win against the Orioles, or you want to play a team where you got to face maybe DeGrom twice? You don't, so it's going to be interesting. One thing to note, we've seen how everyone's been, dealing with this coronavirus, and they're doing the right thing. They're trying to be cautious where they can be cautious. And one of the things the Mets are doing to be cautious in the beginning is Chili Davis, the Mets hitting coach, did a really good job last year. I mean, you take over a team and your rookie hits the home run rookie record. I mean, Chili gets credit for some of that. Chili Davis is working remotely for the time being until he lets things, settle over. Mac, what did you think of Chili Davis as a player?
Oh, I thought he was a great player. I mean, listen, there are some players that don't get as much press and as much notoriety through history, and there are a lot of, especially baseball. I mean, there's literally almost 1,000 players that have come through that have done a great job and don't get the credit. Chili Davis was an unbelievable hitter, a great fielder. I mean, listen, he's a good hitting coach. He's not it's not like Ted Williams coming to be your hitting coach, because a lot of times these superstars expect you to hit as good as them. So I think that was a great choice. The only thing stopping him is he's from Arizona. So there are cases of spike there. Yeah, and they got a good assistant hitting coach there, Tom Slater. He'll be there. He'll probably be talking with Chili and going over to players, and so I think that was an excellent choice that the Mets made last year with Chili Davis being.
Yeah, do you remember the memories of Chili Davis, Matt? That any comments about Chili Davis?
That was a player. That was before my time, man. That was before I was even in the sauce of baseball. But what I can say is, as a coach and as a batting coach and stuff like that, he's had success everywhere he's gone, from being a base coach to being a batting coach to being any of that. So they're going to set him up with the old tripod and iPad, and they're going to put him right there in the batting cages. And he's going to be able to give immediate, just, hey, what are you doing? This is what – he can still see it. He can still see what's going on. He can review the hitting tapes. He can review bullpen sessions, things like that. Tom Slater, very qualified guy, been around the league for a long, long time, knows what he's doing. So it'll be fine, and Chili said he's doing it really to protect the other people in the organization.
Respect.
He's not even worried about himself. He's worried about the guys, and that's kind of a quality of him. He's always been a team first type of guy, we know that.
I feel like I have an opportunity here, Matt, to put Mac on the spot on the air. See, for those who don't know, Mac is our guest relations guy, which in other terms means basically he is the one who goes out and gets the guests.
Yep.
So that Jim here doesn't have a stroke for the stuff so he can focus on his stuff. Because I almost have a daily stroke anyway, just trying to do production and build a website. So Matt goes out and makes the contacts to help keep Jim calm, because Matt can tell you privately one day in his memoirs when he writes a book. But anyway, Mac, get me Chili Davis.
I would love to.
Home. He just said he's got the
That's right.
pod.
That would be a great get. Like I said, I just opened an account that's going to go right straight to the players. So I'm going to try and skip through the Mets sucky media. I'm sorry to say that.
Chili Davis. I'm not talking about Hormel Chili CEO. I'm talking about Chili Davis. Reach out. Tell him Jim needs some support. That'll be a good get. I'll get. Listen, as I promised you before, I'll be trying to get more Mets, Rangers, and stuff like that. There's organizations that work with you, and there's organizations that really don't. So I got to try and start. Yeah, I got to, and the Jets, and there's a lot of them. Not to put them down. I mean, I know they're busy organizations, but when you can get huge organizations like the Yankees, the Giants didn't say no. They said when the Giants bigger, they said they didn't say no. They answered you. So that's
the biggest two New York teams in the country, the biggest in the state, have let us have access. So I got to find a new angle to work around the Mets and the Jets.
Davis, don't even go.
So I'll try, and if not, I will send you a can of chili. And
I don't want it.
Here's your chili.
So our last Mets note, because then I want to slide in a couple MLB stories if we can, non-related to New York. And even Dominic touched base on it, that he said Betances was a loss for the Yankees.
Yeah.
Betances' health is a big deal for the Mets. He seems to be okay. I saw him yesterday. He seems to be healthy. I'm excited. He's a big part. Just from the Mets side of things, I can tell you that if Betances missed a significant amount of time this year or gets hurt, I'm going to be really concerned. Extremely concerned.
He's going to be a key piece for them going forward for the Mets, because although it's a big loss for the Yankees, we can compensate. I don't know if the Mets can compensate for that kind of loss.
And stuff, yeah.
Yeah, we can fill in. We can fill in 2 innings at a time with our bullpen and stuff like that to get through those in-between games. But I don't know if the Mets are going to be able to compensate if Betances is not ready to go full strength the whole way.
Mac, right? I mean, he's got to be healthy.
I don't know. You guys had an off year relieving, but the year before that, your relievers pitched very well. So I'm not going to count out the Mets bullpen yet. Betances has that partial Achilles tear, and a lot of the power from the pitch, from that velocity, comes from that leg stretching out and kicking off that mound. And if he's right now, I think he's in the low 90s or something. I read he's got to get back up where he's 98 miles an hour, 97.
I'm not sure to see that this year, Mac. To be honest,
I know that's well. Then maybe they got to work on his. Maybe they got to work on his stuff. Maybe he's got to throw a better breaking ball. Maybe he's got to, maybe he's got to have a cutter or something like that. That might help him out. So, and maybe he shouldn't even be pitching anyways on that torn Achilles. I mean, I don't know if that's going to make it worse. So I would imagine they're going to get some kind of a lot of stretching, a lot of different things for his Achilles, build that leg back up, and maybe by the middle of the year, Jim, maybe he'll be back up near 96 miles an hour or something like that where he's effective. I think you guys, let me tell you, I think your bullpen this year is going to be fine. I just have a feeling you guys are going to have a great season this year.
Well, the whole key to the bullpen is going to be not just his health, but if Edwin Diaz returns to what he had 2 years ago in Seattle, where he was the best closer in baseball, the Mets bullpen goes from middle to right up to the top.
Right.
They paid him so much money to come in there last year and underperform. It was sad to watch with Edwin Diaz last year.
I mean, he only makes the league minimum, I think. I think he makes $557,000 a year. But they did give up a lot. I mean, basically, they took on
capital. That's what it is. Exactly. They took on the Cano contract,
For him.
But he didn't perform last year. And if he doesn't perform again this year, they're not going to do anything. They got to get Marcus Stroman healthy. They've got to make sure Betances is ready to go, all these guys. And we'll see where it goes. The fact of the matter is they're going to swing the bats. I think they're going to be okay hitting. And if the pitching stays healthy, they'll be all right. But they can't They can't miss any time, extended period of time. They can't go on 15-day DLs during a 60-day season. It's just not.
That's unless it's coronavirus related. There's nothing you can do.
Yeah,
that's not.
You got.
And that's all teams, though. I mean, all teams are going to suffer something like that. Let me tell you, I think that I told Jim this, and you and I, Matt. I think the Mets have a good shot at winning 38 games this year if their bullpen holds up. They got a great team. They got great position players, and man, their starting pitching is really, really good. If their bullpen holds up, they got a shot at challenging for the first place in that division.
I sure hope so. But we'll see how it all plays out. I mean, I can tell you from a Mets perspective, as a Mets fan, that last year it was just like anytime I got to the point of the game where the bullpen came in and I'm watching it, my stomach gets upset because I'm nervous. I'm just nervous. Like what? Because it's like every reliever was Jekyll and Hyde outside of Lugo. Lugo was outstanding.
They were finding new ways to lose every other day. Like I'm talking about, like how can you lose this game? And they'll be like, well, hold my beer, let me show you. And they would lose, and you're just –
They didn't lose anymore. But by then it was too late. You know what?
Yeah, exactly. They got themselves in a hole.
And they almost –
Brody, let me tell you, the first person when ownership changes it needs to be gone is going to be Brody Van Wagenen.
See, I like Brody. Me and you're right.
A lot of people do. Listen, a lot of people do. A lot of people like the agent angle and this and that. But let me tell you something. The reason you picked up that Robinson Cano contract is because he was Robinson Cano's agent. You understand?
That's fine. You give him a lot of heat for the Cano. I'm not.
You don't let your GM play personal politics with your team and your roster. Look, I mean, his personal relationships has handicapped the Mets for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I tell you why I disagree with that, and then we'll get into regular other baseball stuff. Is if Edwin Diaz was not included, we wouldn't have Cano. So that's why I don't know if I buy completely into that argument. But it is what it is. One of the things I wanted to bring up. And again, you're listening to Big Guy Sports Radio Network. If you can, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram at the Big Guy Sports Network, New York Sports Radio, but at the Big Guy Sports on any social media. We're always around. We're always answering questions. If you have Zen to want to write or contribute or come on the air and do a show, maybe even your own show, reach out to us. We're currently working on a brand new website. I'm sure you've seen the current one, and it's pretty spectacular. But that's me plugging myself. Anyway, I want to talk about one of the things that came out the other day is Mike Trout. He has a baby on the way, and he said he still feels uncomfortable, and he's not sure if he's going to play. Now, we all understood that certain players were not going to play. You've seen a few say they're not playing. And I'm not saying this from a human life perspective, so don't think that I'm devaluing someone's life. But I'm saying there are some players who just, this is the way it is in sports, who are way more important and cast a bigger shadow than other guys. Mm-hmm. Forget the Angels as a team, because I don't think they're a playoff team anyway, even though they did get Rendon, but they still haven't fully fixed the pitching yet, which is their problem. Mike Trout would be a big loss for the sport. And I also worry that if Mike Trout said to baseball, and we'll go Mac to Matt, I worry about if the players saw someone as big as Mike Trout come out and say, I'm not going to play because I'm concerned about safety around my baby, that maybe other players then say, well, wait a second. If the biggest player in the sport, the best player in the sport does that, maybe Garrett Cole looks and says, wait a second, I just had a baby. Maybe I don't play. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard. It's easier to follow Mike Trout than Ryan Zimmerman. Matt, you know what I'm saying?
Well, I mean, I think this is going to be – you can have players come out saying stuff like this, that they're not going to play because of family concerns. And I really don't think it's going to affect the average player. I mean, a lot of players don't make what these people make per year, and they're being paid for what happened this year. So I think that maybe a few big players that might step aside because of their families that can afford it. The majority of the players can't afford it.
But I want to know from you is that if Mike Trout decides to officially not play, since he is a huge name, you see it may be having a ripple effect where a couple other huge names who normally wouldn't have sat out decide, you know what, if Mike Trout can do it and not catch heat, maybe I could do it.
No, I think it's going to come down to personal decisions. I don't think that
Cole was no influence. You don't think?
No, because I think what does Cole care what Mike Trout does really?
Well, no, he might look at it and say, "Well, I just had a new baby."
Well, if he wanted to do that, he doesn't have to wait for Mike Trout. I know what you're saying, Jim, but I don't think that's going to affect anybody's decision. I think it's a personal decision, sort of like basketball with LeBron and Durant. If he was playing, I mean, everybody makes their decision. They either want to go.
Disagree. I feel like, and I want to get Matt's opinion on this too. I kind of feel on the baseball side of it, but I kind of feel like if LeBron said it's not safe, I'm not playing, a lot of people would follow. I think LeBron holds a lot of weight in the NBA, but I don't want to get into the NBA. I'm just saying that's where I disagree. So I want to ask you, Matt, do you feel that Mike Trout is the best player in the sport? That if he feels it's not safe, does that carry a lot of weight with players who maybe are on the fence right now, but afraid to be the one to almost cross that picket line and sit out? Because the other guys are small names.
Yeah, I think you have to look at the circumstances. I think it's very circumstantial for a lot of these guys. I think some of them will look and say, all right, Mike's having a baby. He doesn't want to risk it. And Mike still hasn't even said that he's not going to play. He said that he's just not comfortable yet. Maybe when he sees what's being implemented by MLB and what they're going to be doing as far as fans and things like that, he might be more comfortable. He might still play. But you are right, Jim. The name carries weight and it matters, as opposed to someone like, say, Ian Desmond or Zimmerman or Ross or one of those guys that said, hey, man, I'm not going to play. Most people are like, okay, whatever. Now you get a Mike Trout, you get a Bryce Harper, you get a Aaron Judge, you get guys like that start saying, hey, man, I don't know if I'm going to do this. Then, yeah, you'll see more and more players make that decision like, okay, I'm more comfortable doing it now because he's doing it.
Because Mike is the LeBron James.
That is clout. He is the clout of the MLB. You know what I'm saying? Like Mike Trout has all the clout, you know? Hashtag Mike Trout, all the clout in the MLB, all right? So if he goes, a lot of other guys might follow just depending on the circumstances, their own personal circumstances. But Garrett Cole's not the guy, though, Jim, because he said he wants to take home the trophy to be the first ever COVID World Series champion, you know, pandemic.
Right, well, that
makes
the question I want to ask you about Garrett Cole. Let's just be human. We're human at the end of the day. And you could sit here and we could try to act like we know, but nobody could sit here and tell me that Garrett Cole cares more about baseball than his newborn baby.
No, of course not. I mean, nobody would ever speculate.
Of course. So let me ask you a question. Do you think Garrett Cole, maybe a part of him would want to sit out because he's worried about his baby's health, but that he feels feels a lot of pressure, that it would look really bad that he signed that big deal and then took off right away?
Nobody's cutting their eyes at you for taking care of your family and stuff like that in these times and places, Jim. I don't think there's anyone in any of those locker rooms that's going to look at a guy and say, "Oh, you're taking time off to take care of your kid."
Fans, have you seen the Yankee fans on social media?
Nobody cares what the fans have to say about what this man does with his family. He doesn't care what I have to say, and he shouldn't.
No, he shouldn't. But I'm just telling you, the fans, they're crazy. Mac, you had like screw the fans. What?
No, I mean, listen. He wants to play baseball. I mean, why? Listen. He had a
question. The question was, do you think a part of him feels pressured that he needs to not let the city down?
I mean, look at it. He signed a contract. Listen, this man has enough money where he can sit out if he wants to. This guy wants to get on a new team. He wants to pitch. He wants to play baseball. I mean, I would imagine he'll take a little bit of care about him meeting his kid, wear a mask, do all that. You know, I mean, he's not going to go home and just hug his kid and blow all over the kid. I mean, come on, let's be serious. I mean, come on, man.
You're telling me you don't think at any time in the last week, now that his child was just born, that he sat down with his wife and didn't at least have a discussion about it? Like, should I play?
Sure. I mean, listen. What's the discussion?
Should I play? Is it safe?
When I come home, honey, I will make sure I wear a mask. I'll change. I'll shower before I touch the baby. I mean, of course, it's common sense, Jim. Listen, he wants to play baseball. I would imagine he's had a thought and a discussion with his wife, of course.
You don't think Mike Trout wants to play baseball?
That's Mike Trout's decision. I mean, I don't even see any articles on Mike Trout. I don't care about whether Mike Trout plays for his team or not.
He's the sport elite.
I'm talking about personally. Of course, I care news-wise. I'm talking about personally. I care if Cole plays or not. Trout's not playing for me, so he can do what he wants. I mean, listen.
Thank God.
I know there was a conversation. Of course there was. And of course he's concerned. And he's not going to go home and wrestle with a little baby, with chance of getting a virus to him. Come on.
Yeah, no, I think, of course, the conversation was had. Hey, do you think this is right? Do you think this is safe? I'm sure they're on standby just like everybody else. Let's see what happens. Let's see what's going to happen. Am I even going to come home every day? Am I going to be isolated after a game for a couple days? Like, what we don't know yet the specifics of what they're going to do to implement the safety measures and stuff like that. And baseball is a very distant sport. Right. Garrett Cole could show up to the stadium, go out there, pitch his game, use a different ball every time he's on the mound every inning, and go home and not have to shake hands, see anyone, talk to anyone in it. None of that. Baseball is very –
these answers from 2 Yankees.
Well, no, anybody can do that. Mike Trout can do that. Mike Trout can go out there.
Much bigger person for the sport than Garrett Cole is.
No, absolutely. No, for sure. And if Mike Trout was out for the year, granted, the market for the Angels is not some grand market where they're drawing all the fans in the world. But, if Mike Trout played for the Yankees, that might be something to talk about if he was to sit out. Or if Mike Trout played for the Red Sox or the Cubs or something like that.
Or the Mets.
Or the Mets even the Mets.
If he played for the Mets, we'd be kicking your butt all season. You're lucky he doesn't play for the Mets.
No, you wouldn't because he's going to stay home, Jim. He's staying home.
He said maybe. That's why I said maybe.
Right.
Just let me switch to something else. I need a quick prediction from you guys. You only get one name. So I'll even give you a couple seconds to think about it. So I think it's no surprise the Indians are now considering changing their name. I'm considering changing my last name to Jim Blank, and then nobody could say anything. So the Redskins are going to change their name. I'm sure the Chiefs will be next. I mean, so this is how ridiculous things have gotten. So the Indians, give me a name. The Cleveland what? What do you got?
For a name for the Cleveland
Indians. Give me a prediction. They're going to be called the Cleveland what?
What's Cleveland known for? Corn or what's Ohio?
Cars. I have no idea.
The Cleveland used cars.
The Cleveland used cars.
That's the name. The Cleveland used. Then how are you going to logo that? You're going to put
a
logo of a broken Buick?
It doesn't offend nobody except for people that own used cars, right? So I mean, that would be a
picture of the car looks like.
Maybe they could abbreviate it. The Cleveland UC.
You call them the Cleveland Rockers for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame that's in Cleveland.
That's good.
You can call them the Cleveland Rockers or the Cleveland Rollers. Keep it with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame theme, and we can run with
Cleveland that. Rock and Rollers.
That's cool.
Yeah, the Cleveland Rock and Rollers. You know what I'm saying? The Rock and Rollers or
the Hall of Famers.
Cleveland overall sucks as a city. Okay. But
don't say that.
There's nothing nice there. It's cool. They got a nice zoo. They got a really nice zoo in Cleveland. We can call them like a zoo animal.
Have you ever been to Cleveland?
Yeah, I've driven through Cleveland. I've worked in Cleveland.
Through it?
Hey, I've worked in Cleveland. I built a skating rink in Cleveland one time.
Did you really?
He doesn't mean that, Cleveland people. The
Cleveland, Tennessee is what I meant. I'm so sorry. Cleveland, Ohio. No.
So the Phillies are working hard to make sure the Phillies, I have a feeling, are going to, bring back JT Realmuto. Bryce Harper's hitting in the cage with shirts on saying we love JT Realmuto. They're working hard to keep arguably the best catcher in the sport. Phillies are not afraid to pay anybody. So I'm starting to lean towards he never hits free agency, Mac. I mean, the Phillies have no problem throwing $24 million a year at a catcher.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, but something, there's other things besides money. So, I mean, it depends on what kind of deal another team can offer. And listen, the Phillies, a lot of people they like to stay with, and a lot of them like to stay with their hometowns. They live there and stuff like that too. So, I mean, yeah, it looks like he's going to stay. unless somebody can come up with an unbelievable package and maybe a couple perks thrown in for a good measure.
Well, the question is, does he hit the market, Matt, to even get those other offers, or do they just re-sign him before he becomes?
No, yeah, they didn't bring him up there from Miami to let him hit the market, man. This is a guy with 92 runs, 148 hits last year, 83 RBIs. You can't let him walk. He's 29 years old. Guy's still young, still got a lot of prime baseball. They're only paying him $5.9 million next year if they keep him. Or this past year, I'm sorry. And so they have to re-sign him. And Bryce Harper said basically in his tweet, he said it'll be sad if they don't re-sign him. He's been very open with them. And I think the Phillies realize that when your star is speaking, you have to listen. And they'll take action. They'll re-sign him. He won't hit the market.
They might as well re-sign him, because once they found out they weren't getting their hometown favorite, because, after Bryce Harper had signed with the Phillies, a lot of people said, Mike Trout grew up a Phillies fan. He lives close to Philly, grew up close to Philly. When he becomes a free agent in 2 years, he's going to go to Philly, and Philly will pay him, and then you'll have an outfield of Harper and Trout. And then Trout went and signed an extension to basically finish his career in Los Angeles. So now they know they don't got to wait for Trout. He's not coming to Philly. So, you can go and
you never know, man.
Sign Real Muto. I guess you could trade for Trout, but you'd have to give up quite a bit. So we made it through another show. We're down the home stretch here. We got a lot of good stuff in. Dominic was, he's great. He could just,
that was a great interview.
Let us know. I got to get him to write a Met book. Make sure you can do research about anything and write a book.
That was him driving off. You heard it. You heard you say Mets book, and then all you heard was a truck off in the distance.
I'm just telling you, there's a market for it.
Oh yeah. In fact, I'm getting in contact with a couple Mets authors as we're talking in the last couple of days. So we'll see if we can get one of them on.
Absolutely. But he had a lot of good insight, and anytime you
great
information about stuff you don't know, that's a lot.
I love the stories, guys. I love the stories behind, the people and the different things people did coming through. It's just
people. You were like 6-7 years old when most of them guys.
Right. Well, yeah, I was still just
that twinkle in someone's eye yet.
Yeah, I was shining shoes, and then delivering newspapers at the time. So
you were delivering newspapers.
Sure, it's
I deliver newspapers in Bayonne, New Jersey when I was growing up.
My favorite story he told today was about Kid Elberfield, and I just thought that was great. The Tabasco Kid was his nickname because of his fiery personality. I love that story. That's such a good one. That's a part of Yankees history right there in the early 1900s into the 1920s and 30s. Just an integral part of the Yankees history and the development of the team and what they stood for. An integral part of the development of New York and what it stood for as a city and how the people were. So great time.
Not only that, guys. We take for granted how these programs are now. The NFL, the MLB, and all this stuff. They started like our kids programs. Wearing shirts from sponsors and these old ragtag things, and trying to put something together. We don't realize how hard it is to put a league together, especially back then.
Right. Well, tomorrow. Tomorrow is obviously wake up with football in New York.
Can't wait.
So, we'll have some interesting topics that we will talk about later today. We'll get back into talk about Cam Newton a little bit more and, what's going to happen with him on the Patriots. A few players are announcing that they're possibly going to hold out unless they get a contract. We'll talk about that. David Njoku, who I probably said his name wrong. Njoku has said that we love him because he went to the U. Has said that he wants out of Cleveland. So he would like to be traded, according to his agent. So we'll touch base on some of that. And just a lot of different things. We'll touch base on the Redskins. I'll give you guys, unlike with the Indians where I put you on the spot to where Mac just went with used cars, which I know he could have a better effort than that. If I didn't put him on the spot, it's not his fault. It's me. Blame me. But tomorrow I'll want some names for the Redskins. So give that a little thought. I
already know what they're going to be.
I don't want to know today. I don't want to.
New cars.
I want to make them listen in. We'll talk a little about Tua to the Dolphins and kind of can he be the first quarterback there to, really Miami hasn't had since Dan Marino, that guy.
Right.
So maybe
he's not going to be, but we'll talk about that tomorrow.
We can crap on him tomorrow, but we love Miami. And I'm going to start putting disclosures up before every show that state Matt's opinions and views are as his own and do not represent the big guy.
That's right.
It's
all me, baby.
So that we can make sure that people will come on.
Yeah, so we can get guests. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
Max reach outs, because so, but we got a lot of football stuff we'll talk about. It might not be, all Giants Jets tomorrow. It might just be more about as much the NFL because, we're getting through that stage and we're waiting. And we'll definitely talk about the ever going Mac and Jim heated debate about whether preseason matters. Because
doesn't matter.
You might not have it. So we'll get to talk about that. So we have some good stuff for tomorrow. So what do you guys have? Tell the viewers before you leave, Mac and then Matt. What do you have planned, Mac, for the 4th of July? Work, huh?
Working today.
The whole day. Matt?
Shouldn't be working on a holiday, Mac. I will be in the backyard at the pool with my puppy and my girl and some friends, my cousin. And we're going to grill and we're going to jump in that pool and hang out all day long. I'm probably going to blast through a bottle of Patron or something. I don't know. We'll see.
I think me and you are similar, except because I own a condo and not a house. I don't have the pool. And they closed the public pool at the condo community because they don't want to get sued for someone getting sick. So we got hamburgers. We got corn on the cob. We got pasta salad, and I've got a case of Corona. So I think we're
sounds good, man. We're ready to rock and roll.
So, Mac, I'm sorry that you have to go to work, but I will raise up a Corona for you later.
In your honor.
I might even take a picture and send it to you.
Thank you. That would be great.
For you, buddy.
That'd be great.
So we're done. We're out. Good show. We're good to go for the day.
See you tomorrow.
Yeah.
Have a good time. Have a good day, guys.
Have a good day. Enjoy your 4th of July and enjoy the holiday and celebrate.
Wake up football, 8:30 tomorrow.
8:30. Yes, sir. We're out.
Let's go.
It's the Worldwide Sports Radio Network.